In this lesson, we'll use Grease Pencil to add new details to our render. Let's begin. Now that we know the types of details that we can add to our render, let's quickly zoom around the image and give some simple examples of how I might detail the image. When adding details, you'll typically get the best results for your efforts if you focus the most detailed drawings on the areas that are the closest to the camera. You can then save the more simple details, such as the plus sign method, for areas that are further from the camera and are a little bit more obscured. This method will allow you to add the most implied detail to your image with the most efficient use of your time. An area close to the camera that's worthy of detailing are these floating stairs here on the right side. Let's add a few details to these stairs now. So I'm just going to zoom in down here, and these floating stairs might be a nice place to add more cracks and crumbling corners. This will further add to the aged and decrepit nature of the world by making these already unsafe stairs feel even more precarious. So let's quickly go through here and add some more details. Okay, so I've added some more details to these steps. So over here on the right side, I'm just going to hit F12 to render the image and see what the details that we've added look like. So let's zoom over here to the steps. If you're following along roughly with what I did, in general, I was just replicating the simple details that we've added other places. So I have this kind of crumbly corner. I have lines here that in this case go around the corner, but in general, they're very similar to the plus signs. I've also added some cracks here. On some of the steps, I've added details that look like a crack that has split this corner here. So there's a deep gouge here in this corner. I've also added a crack that goes up the wall from the step to make it look like it's putting strain on the wall. And then further down here, I just did simple lines that covered the corners here and also more crumbly edges. So even with these really simple doodles, if we look over here on the right side, they all kind of work together and gel to make a much more detailed result than we would expect. These steps now really look like they're kind of crumbling and falling off the wall in some cases. It's really easy to add details like this when you simply just have to click and draw right onto your model. One word of advice though when you're drawing is that we'll remember from our lesson going over the basics of Grease Pencil that we need to be careful with drawing over the edges while using the surface mode. So you wouldn't want to draw lines, say on this step here, that go down past the edge of the step. Because while it looks correct here, if we rotated our camera, this line here that goes off the edge is actually going to snap backwards and stretch to meet the wall beyond. So be careful when drawing details like this. You want to make sure that any detail that you draw remains within the step that you're drawing it on. It's okay to go around corners like I did over here, but make sure that you don't extend off the edge of a step where you know that it's basically just open air behind it. With these steps detailed, now let's go over here to the left and add some details to this bridge. The bridge is likely made of some sort of metal, so let's add some details to help reinforce that. Adding details like the edges of metal beams or the separations between supports can really make it feel more like metal. You can also add things like rivets to make it feel like it's multiple pieces of metal that have been riveted together. Now let's go through here and add some more detail. As always, feel free to follow along with what I'm doing or just come up with your own details. Okay, so I have my details added to the side of this bridge. So I'm just going to hit F12 to render them. And then let's zoom over here onto the render. So let's discuss some of the details that I added. So in general, I went through on this bridge and added breaks between some of the more obvious parts that look like they might have been a separate piece of metal. So I separated off this front side here. I added a cross line here to separate this beam so that it looks like it's a different piece of metal. I left this one down here unbroken, but then I added a line here so that it's attached to this larger block. And then in some areas, like down here, I added a long line that goes along the side to make this look more like an I-beam. This is also an area where I added a bunch of those rivets that I talked about earlier. And then in general, I just kind of went through and added different cracks along the edges where these pieces of metal meet, similar to this. I added some cuts and drip lines along the side of this one. Over here on this piece of metal, I added some horizontal lines as well as vertical lines here to make this look more like a structural piece. And then I just went through and embellished some of the details that were already there. So I continued this scribble line down the side. And then I went through the top here and just added some parallel lines. So just like all the previous examples, just a little bit of scribbling and doodling along the edges can really imply a lot of different detail. You don't really need to put a whole ton of thought into where these lines go, just some simple decisions like making this horizontal line carry across, or deciding to keep this one slightly diagonal to make this piece of metal are really the bulk of the decisions that you need to make. After that, you can kind of just start adding cracks and drips and rivets wherever you like on the side of this metal thing, and when you zoom out, it's going to look pretty cool regardless of what you did. Everything we draw is just to break up the surfaces and imply further detail, even if it's just non-specific scribbles. At this point, we're going to stop going through in-depth examples like the stairs, the walls, and this bridge. But before we end this lesson, let's quickly go through all the areas that I would consider placing extra details. So the first place that you might consider would be the sides of these columns as well as the front. You can just go through here, and just like last time, we're just going to add some non-specific scribbles, some different cracks, and really just do whatever you'd like. You can also add details to these pipes here in the background, or even along the side of this bridge here. So maybe we extend some of these broken pipes and add cracks here to make them look like they're not just kind of cut off cleanly. We want these edges to be a little bit more rough, so maybe we can make some jagged lines here. Or on this side, you can find some of these lines that already exist and just further embellish them to make it look like there's more drips and stuff coming from these maybe cracks in the pipes or just openings in them where it's rusted through. Other areas that you could add details would be the walls. So that could be literally any of these walls, but in this case, maybe we add some to this slanted wall here above. So we're going to add some drips here. And in the case of this specific wall, for these drip lines, you would actually want to follow the curvature of the wall. So these drips would actually run this direction. So they're going to run the length of the wall. And that's because this wall is slanted, which means the drips would have to flow down diagonally until they reach the end, and then they would fall down this direction. So that's something to consider, is the geometry of the wall that you're drawing these drips on does make somewhat of a difference. In general, almost all of these walls here are flat, but in the case up here of this slanted wall, you do have to take that into consideration. And then the last example I have for you would be this area in the back here. We have this bridge as well as this huge archway in the back. So for the bridge, we can add cracks coming from the corners, just like usual, or we can add long bands on this. So we can start drawing a line here and just follow the curvature all the way down to imply some sort of extra architectural detail on this bridge. So maybe the top of this bridge is a different material than the bottom. So maybe the bottom is like a big metal piece and then the top is concrete. So these are the kind of things you can think about, is you might be able to draw details that make the material look like it's made of one thing versus the other. So if we went through here and just started adding rivets to the bottom of this might make this look a lot more like metal rather than concrete. And then for the archway in the back, this area is really far back there. So in general, you're not going to add too many specific details back here, but this would be a good place for the sort of plus sign method that we discussed earlier, or just doing the horizontal or vertical parallel lines. This is just something here to break up this large space. These are by no means the only areas that you could add details to. Honestly, the possibilities are truly endless. You could really go wild and detail every single inch of this image if you had the time and the desire to. Before we bring this lesson to an end, let's quickly walk you through how to import my personal detail drawing if you'd prefer to use that for the rest of the class. If not, please by all means continue using your own unique drawing. So our first step here is going to be to exit drawing mode. We can do that over here by clicking this drop down and going back to object mode. And then just like last time, we're going to go over here to File, Append, navigate to the project assets that we downloaded at the very beginning of this class, then select the Grease Pencil Details Append Blender file. With it selected, go down here and click Append, then go to Object and double click on that. And then we're going to select GP_details and hit Append. Just like last time, this is going to import my exact drawing into your scene, and then we're going to want to hide the one that we were just drawing during this lesson. So we would go over here to GPencil_details, click on this eyeball, and also click on the camera icon. And now if we select this GP_details object, you can zoom in here to the image and see all the different places that I added drawings if you wanted to use it as a basis for your own, just as inspiration, or if you just like to use my drawing for the rest of the lesson. Any option you choose is perfectly fine. And that's it. You can either spend some time finishing your own drawings, or you can proceed to the next lesson with me and use these appended details for your render. While we're done using grease pencil for this class, don't hesitate to draw any details you want into your own world. The best thing about grease pencil is how easy it is to make the scene incredibly detailed and unique. In the next lesson, we'll start the compositing process for our render. I'll see you there.